Hello and welcome to NewsClick. Recently, there has been considerable speculation about the completion of the last bits which would be required to formalize the Indo-US nuclear deal and what is expected the import of US nuclear plants into India. We have with us today Dr. A.D. Damodaran, a veteran nuclear scientist, formerly with BARC. The issue now pending is that the US wants limited liability, whereas many of us in this country feel that in the eventuality of something going wrong, and clearly the consequences will be quite large. Yeah. Such limited liability means essentially allowing people to get away with what could be a major disaster in this country. How do you see this?
At the outset, let me say it is a historic coincidence that when the government is planning to bring into the parliament this civil liability bill, the nation is also, I don't know, I shouldn't use the word celebrating, but remembering this great unfortunate thing, Bhopal tragedy, where even after 25 years, this country, including its political, administrative, judicial infrastructure, has not been able to settle an otherwise purely chemical accident in a company owned by a large multinational. In this particular case, ironically again, an American multinational.
Right.
I am not attributing any motives, but obviously this demands that any liability bill proposed at the instance of the same country, we have to view with added concern.
Right.
And in Bhopal, it was a chemical accident, but of course now we know with many long-term ill effects. But in the case of a potential nuclear accident, we know very well what is going to happen. So any liability bill being associated with nuclear power reactors, I think needs tremendous caution, and we simply can't allow it to go unheeded.
Right.
And
precisely what happened in Bhopal also was that the accident or the disaster had much larger ramifications, which after all these tortuous years of litigation, the Union Carbide Corporation and its successors have refused to meet the full liability in terms of the damage caused to the people. And that's part of the problem with a potential nuclear accident is the actual ramifications of the disaster may be very large, yes, but the Americans want their liability to be restricted.
Yeah. See, in the case of Bhopal, if you read the very famous report, very articulate scientific report by Dr. S. Varadarajan, who was formerly the Director General of CSIR, very distinguished technical person, there it is written that that accident was caused by allowing all the safety precautions to be violated.
Quite.
By the management. In fact, the charge sheet is unequivocal.
Quite right.
Even then, we are not able to settle it.
That's right.
Now, in the case of a potential nuclear accident, even to identify to such a case whether we will be able to do, we don't know.
Quite.
So, one has to be doubly careful in going through this.
To clarify issues for our viewers, in this case, technology or the plant will be supplied by an American company, but there is going to be an operator,
yes,
in India,
yes,
which is slightly different from the Bhopal case,
yes,
where the parent corporation was itself, yes, or its subsidiary in India, yes, was running the plant. Yes. The Americans now seem to be saying, our company is only going to be supplying the equipment, whereas the operator is somebody, let the liability be borne by the operator. Could you clarify this?
I am not able to clarify very much more because Number one, the bill itself has not yet been placed in Parliament. We don't know in what form it is going to be. Now, yesterday there was already an article by a very distinguished constitutional lawyer that this is against the fundamental rights. Now, we have no idea what it is going to be, the content of the bill. A couple of weeks ago, in the last press conference by Dr. Kakotkar, the former chairman Atomic Energy Commission, he has elaborated that this has nothing to do with the supply of US reactors. It was in the mind of DAE as part of a historic evolution. Now, all these added together, I wouldn't like to add anything more. Let us see the bill first.
But in this case, I think the context also is surely that if a supplier of equipment is there, and if the equipment does not perform as per specification or has defects, then clearly there is a liability which goes beyond what was originally stipulated by the firm.
Even from that point of view, I look at it from my own knowledge and from even some of the detailed interviews given by the present chairman and managing director of Nuclear Power Corporation of India Limited, Mr. Jain. You know, in India, this regulating this nuclear power generation is overseen by Atomic Energy Regulatory Board.
That's right.
And the Nuclear Power Corporation so far has been the operator.
Yeah.
Now, even between these two, they take lot of time to understand the complete details of the reactor design, then the reactor manufacture, all types of technical details. In fact, the other day Mr. Jain said, we have not completed the technical discussions with Areva yet, leave alone the next stage.
That's right.
So, this in no way should be in that way treated similar to the Bhopal at all.
Quite.
Because there the equipments are much more standard.
Familiar.
Even there we messed up. That's a different issue. So here, how is it that all these things are being treated? I think Atomic Energy also should come out with a much more explanatory note to support the bill. That's how I look at it.
There is also an additional factor now being introduced, and that is the likelihood of amendments in India to allow for private sector operators to enter this domain. From what you've just said, it's a very complex relationship, and between a public sector operator and governmental regulatory authorities, there is a problem. Now, with people who are unfamiliar with nuclear technology trying to enter this, isn't this going to open up far more uncertainty into this already dangerous area?
I think during our, I don't like to use the opposition for opposition's sake, when a group of senior scientists were presenting their cases against the hurry with which this Indo-US nuclear deal was being pushed through in the name of ensuring energy security.
That's right.
I think I should underline that energy security. People like Dr. A. Gopalakrishnan has raised many of these issues because these are very complex technologies, and to assimilate it and operate it, and with an appropriate Atomic Energy Regulatory Board, all these are very, very difficult. One has to go slow. In fact, this is an opinion given by Dr. Kakotkar himself in one of his interviews. And he says the Indian private sector cannot come in just like that. Maybe in due course of time they may. We don't know. I will give you one story. You would have heard of this famous Bechtel construction company, American Bechtel. They have published 100 years of their history. There I read in their chapter on nuclear. You know, they are one of the major construction companies of nuclear power plants. In fact, if American plant power systems come to India, maybe Bechtel may be a contractor. You know what they did? In the late 50s or early 60s, when US Atomic Energy Commission opened it to the private sector, in theory, Bechtel decided to spend 10% of their budget with 10% of their people for 10 years to achieve the necessary technological capability to enter into this area.
Sure.
I am not aware of any one of our companies even thinking on that line. So it's going to be pretty difficult. We simply can't hurry up.
Right.
So today, of course, in the Atomic Energy Act, it has been reserved for the public sector.
That's right.
And entering into the private sector, I don't think it is a practical solution in the immediate context at all.
Right.
Whether it should be legally Indian private sector, I think that's a matter of debate.
Sure.
We need not spend time on it.
So we will look forward, we hope, to seeing a bill before Parliament so that it is properly debated and discussed.
Yes.
And these very serious issues that we have discussed today can actually be deliberated upon, and a sober, considered decision should be taken for the benefit of our country.